Hi, I'm Corey Wonderstone, and I'm going to show you a quick and easy way to do some PLA welding that gives you the strongest foundation. It'll take your prints, all these parts here, and turn it into this big mega print that is, I mean it's strong. I mean, it's basically one solid piece now. Ready for wearing, and of course this can be applied to different cosplay pieces and I guess props if you really wanted it to, although the method solely relates to the inside, because the outside you're going to want to do kind of a different method, which is a different video. But to make it a solid piece, we're going to be focusing more so on the inside areas and some on the outside. So the first thing that you're going to want to do before you go out and start melting pieces together is to gather the materials. So first thing you want to do is get a mask or respirator, the Gorilla Glue permanent all-weather duct tape, and I'll explain why later, soldering iron or hot knife, any sort of super glue gel, and optional 3D pen, and arc reactor. But it's necessary. So the reason why I suggest getting the all-weather permanent Gorilla duct tape, it has a blue inside, because it offers the strongest hold out of all the duct tapes that I have used, and I use a lot of duct tape. So when I was actually building this suit, I would use this duct tape to do movement tests to see how strong something would be before I started like welding parts together or cutting to measure. So in my opinion, this is almost like doing a permanent bond or weld with it, but it'll come off pretty easy as long as you just kind of rip it off. Soldering iron, hot knife, personal preference, completely up to you. The reason why I say the gels is because the liquids, once you put that stuff on in between the cracks, unless you want to start fiddling around with gloves, it's just going to get everywhere. With the gel, you have more control. And an additional option, cheap alternative, like 30 bucks, is a 3D pen. Pretty self-explanatory. Well, except I'll explain it to you. Most 3D pens come with filament, but we should already have some left over. So the first thing you're going to want to do before you even apply this amazing duct tape is go over the part and look for any imperfections, especially if you use the RAFT or brim. You're just going to want to pull those off. Any stringy bits, you might not can see this on the camera, but you're going to want to pull those off, because that will ultimately affect the next step. Now for this part, I just use pliers, and I just take it right on off. Now be careful not to actually damage your print. Just want to go along the edges, looking for any little fuzzies, anything that could be left over, anything you don't want. Because the idea here is you're going to want to have it as flush as possible to the next part. So removing these little leftover bits here is almost crucial. So then now that you've gotten it cleaned up on the outside, making sure that you do get rid of these little fuzzy parts, and you've cleaned up your workstation, we are ready for part 2. So depending on the orientation of your print, is where you're going to want to adhere the duct tape. But to start with, we're going to put it on the very top, overlapping, so we can make that kind of flush. So we're going to press on it, line it up on the table. And you're going to want to have this as even as possible. Now once you look at it and determine it's as even as you can get it, you'll fold this piece of tape in on itself, making sure again that it's as flush and where you want it, and making sure you're pressing hard against it so it creates a nice bond. Now we're going to do the same thing to the bottom half. I'm just going to flip it over like that. Make sure it's nice and even. Adhering it. Yep. See? Making sure it's good and even. Tight. And then fold that piece in on itself. Now, if you can see, there's still a little bit of wiggle room, and that's okay. Because this piece, once it lays in on itself, it's fine. So that's almost one solid piece. Now for safety, we're going to add one more piece. See, now since the orientation of this piece, there's a lot of ridges. So I'm just going to split the duct tape in half. Put it on a corner. Pressing both corners. Kind of like a pinching motion. With this in my hand. And I'm using the tension right here to pull it together. Create that so it doesn't wiggle anymore. So once you have those pieces together like you sturdy where you want it, it should look like that. Just a little bit of line, but we'll fill that in another video. So now we are ready to move on to part 3. So now that you have your pieces taped together, I'm just going to use a little bit of the super glue gel just to make sure that everything is still flush. Because it still will bend open just a hair. Now what I'll do is I'll use just something, anything will do really, to make sure that that's kind of flush up against it. And then wipe up the remainder with some sort of paper towel while having it just pressed up against it. Just making sure everything stays flush. And this will help us down the line. And then I'll leave it like that just so it'll set with itself. So now that that's finished setting, we are going to get our hot knife, or soldering iron in this case. Now keep in mind, this thing is going to be hot. And we're just going to dig a piece in. Making an X-like motion, dragging it across. But not too deep. Go back in. So here's a good reason why failed prints are a godsend. To give you a better analogy of what I'm doing there is, imagine this is the piece that we're trying to put back together. This is the seam. So whenever we make that X, it's like making a river. And we're just going to close that river back up gently. We're going to dig it in again and move the thing so where we can close the river back in on itself. But not digging in too much. We're just going to close the river back in on itself. See? And that's the same method that I'm doing for that piece there. Opening the river, closing it back up again. Now we're going to do the same thing over here. Bit of an X motion. And using that to kind of overlap to make one solid piece. So do it in the X motion. And the bits that kind of flop up, you're just going to kind of flip that back over. Yep. And you're going to do this for the whole piece. So now that we have some sort of stability, we're just going to look at the back of it. And it's basically forming into one piece. See now? We're able to do that. So we're going to continue. Still kind of pressing on one side. And we're just going to do that X motion. We're going to bring it across. We're filling that in with the melted plastic. We are just going to drag it across in an X. And then we're going to close that river. So, you know all those trees and extra bits and pieces of your 3D prints? Well, here is a great time to reuse those parts. Take it off, yeah. Now, of course, you can do this however you wish. The point is to melt it back on there. Looks like we're drawing. Look at that. So it's nice and smooth. And you can see it's closing in the gap on the other side. And we're going to continue making that X. And closing that river. Now this is where a good piece of scrap will come in handy for ridges like this. I'm just going to melt that right back onto it. See that? Yep. Just going to melt it right onto it. Now you're going to want to do this for the whole piece. Melt that. If you've ever soldered anything, it's almost the same method. But this will give you the best way. All right, so now that we've got a good bit of the back done, we're just going to go ahead and take off the duct tape, because this should basically be a mostly secure piece by now. Look at that. Basically secure already. And we haven't even penetrated the outside of the print. So to get this top piece, because this is very important. Getting up to the top piece here is you do not want to overlap really anything yet until you get that duct tape. So just to show you, it's not even all the way done, and it's already a very strong method. So the more that we add scrap pieces of PLA to this side here, the stronger it will be, because we're not really going to want to do the same method on the back side here. Okay, so now that you've welded the inside together, if you so desire, you can do some extra work on the outside here. And that's where a 3D pen, in my opinion, is the best option. But if you really want to, you can lightly drag it across. I mean, because this is already a strong enough bond. For those of you that do want to, fill in this gap better with this method, we're going to go ahead and switch to the 3D pen method. So now that you've gotten all of that welded together on the inside, pretty quick and easy method. I wouldn't really worry about doing the outside. I definitely would not recommend doing this method on the outside, the 3D pen, which is optional, that you go in and fill in any cracks that you weren't able to get using that method. Because this is strong. That's strong. It's not going nowhere. And you didn't even have to really touch the outside. But we're going to continue on to another piece. And this method we're going to use across of, I'll say, closing the river and using the 3D pen, which again is optional, but it's essentially the same as using this and this. Essentially the same. Essentially the same. So now I'm going to do the same thing and put tape on it once I figure out how it goes. And we'll start from there. So the one important thing that I would say to note is when you're putting this next piece together is making sure that you get the other piece and make sure that it's not overlapping too much on this side and it actually fits together. Otherwise, you're just, when you go to put this piece on, it won't line up. So you want to make sure that the rest of your pieces are in a spot that is pre-connected with the next spot, so you don't have any trouble, or you don't have to fill it in more. So for this part, we're going to be introducing our 3D pen, which is an optional way. You can still weld all the parts together using the previous method, but this method eliminates us holding this piece with a soldering iron and using it like we're soldering the pieces together. So this is an optional way to do it. I feel like this gives it an even stronger bond, but completely up to you. The other way, as you've seen, still sturdy as could be. So to start this method, let's start right here. Let's right, okay. So instead of folding it back in on itself, we're going to take our 3D pen and fill it in. So you're going to want this on a low setting, and you want to use a pair of these tongs to get off any of that excess before, so you have a clean start. I'm just going to go in here. I'll speed it up just a little bit. And if you notice, I'm kind of filling in a crack. So I'm filling in a lot more detail with this. Just going to keep on kind of filling it in. Right? So now that we have filled it in more, we're just going to take it and we're going to smooth it out. Yep. So it's almost the same method. But we get to fill in more of that gap. Now, as you can see, a close-up, as we fill it in and we kind of smooth it out. So all we did was we just filled it in, smoothed it out, and the 3D pen actually gets into these cracks a little bit better. Just going to take that pen and fill it in. Once that's filled in, you go back over it. You just smooth it out. And now that piece is basically ready. So let me show you an example of pre-filling in those cracks. Now all we'll have to do is just sand that down a little bit. Just getting in those cracks. And that to me will create a very secure bond. Same thing. Any place you see a crack, you can just put that 3D pin in and let that material flow out, fill in that crack. On the inside, it can be as messy as, you see fit. Now remember these cracks I was talking about. If you do happen to have any, this method here will make sanding it, but you gotta be quick if you do overlap, because it will dry quick. So just snip it. Yep. Boom. Good to go. And you do that for any crack. Any crack that you feel like you're gonna need it. Okay, so real simple method, real easy. I mean, you don't have to do too much work on the outside because you're gonna paint and prime it, but you can see this is like one. Okay, so don't do that. One solid piece. So I went ahead and welded it the way that I suggested, which is using a 3D pin to go in between the cracks, and then using a soldering iron to kind of melt over it. And that created just one solid piece. I mean, real easy. I mean, there's not a lot to it. I did go back over on the outside just because the way I printed it, it had low-key failed, but I repaired it. But I covered up the outside just a little bit, but I'm just going to go over that and sand it and put some primer and other stuff in it. But other than that, I mean, this piece is already, it's ready. So that's my quick and easy way. If this video helps you in any way, please like, subscribe, make a comment below. If you believe that I have missed anything, or you have a question, or maybe I missed something and didn't even realize it, either way, drop it below, subscribe, like, do all that fun stuff. And if you want me to print you one of these bad boys, just hit me up. All right, that's the end.